Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to The Plant Path. I'm your host, Seja Popham, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism and Natura Sophia Spagyrics. And I just want to start off by saying thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy life to tune in and check out what I have to share with you today about herbal medicine. And the topic for discussion today is a formula. This is an anatomy of a formula, and we're going to be talking about a nutritive tonic infusion. This is kind of branching off a little bit from a previous post that I did where I was really breaking down the word tonic in herbal medicine and trying to investigate that word a little bit more and get clear on just what exactly it means. And I want to dive deeper into one of the four primary types of tonics that I describe in that post here, talking about the nutritive tonics. I like this class of medicine because this is one of the categories of herbs that naturally, because the whole premise of them for the most part, I mean, many of these herbs have other medicinal virtues, but the general premise of the nutritive tonic aspect of them is just what it sounds like, to provide nutrition to the body. And this is where these herbs are dwelling at that edge between food and medicine. And this is one of the ways that we can really easily and gently incorporate herbal medicine into just our daily life, into our daily routine, to be working with these simple herbs. Well, not simple, they're not exactly simple, but they're not like super intensely, strongly medicinal that you would only take when you have like a serious health complication. This is one of the things that I think is great about herbal medicine, is that we have remedies that you can use and work with while you're healthy to keep you that way, right? That they're mild, they're completely good for consistent daily usage, and the nutritive tonics are a great way to go. So I think there is a real, how would we say it, a case for nutritive tonics in the modern world. I think there's a strong case for using nutritive tonics in the modern world, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit before I get into the formula. So, first of all, when we're talking about nutritives, that means we got to talk a little bit about diet and food and digestion. And I think, generally speaking, the modern human diet in the West tends to be very deficient. And I'm speaking about that essentially universally, regardless of what kind of diet you eat. Yes, that even means if you're eating the most organic diet, the cleanest, best possible food, it's quite likely it's still deficient. And this is because of the way in which industrialized agriculture impacts the nutritional status of food. Well, actually, the way industrial agriculture impacts the nutritional status of the soil, which then impacts the nutritional status of the food, which then impacts the nutritional status of the people that eat that food. And I don't think this was by any means intentional. I think this just happens to be the result of farming practices going on a massive industrial scale as humans moved out of rural areas, as cities got bigger and bigger and bigger. The whole concept of the family farm and homesteading and things like that has, in a way, become a thing of the past, though I would say there is a nice modern resurgence of homesteading, which, we like to think we're a part of. We grow a lot of our own food. We raise all of our own meat here on our homestead, and that's good. But the point being that a lot of the ways that farming is practiced with, from monoculture to not crop rotating, lack of biodiversity in farming situations, lack of rotation in grazing of animals, just huge concentrations. Like, I think a lack of biodiversity is one of the big things that comes down to it. And then, of course, we have the use of chemicals in agriculture, whereby it was the biodiversity that would be part of pest management. Crop rotation would ensure nitrogen is being constantly fixed into the soil. Animals are integrated into vegetable food growing landscapes, whereby there's manure and compost and nutrition being added back into the soil, like the circle being completed, right? It's like we can take and take and take from the earth only so much until we have to incorporate into the model of putting something back into the earth, which is really what, a lot of the animals provide, what biodiversity provides, composting and things like that. So point being that because of the way in which most food is grown, it tends to be deficient. And this is an important thing to consider, because nutrition is at the foundation of our health. Our body functions not just based on the big three, the way I think of nutrients, the big three being, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. But there's also this massive spectrum of vitamins and minerals and trace elements. And that latter one, trace elements, those are the things that your body needs that has to get exogenously, meaning, externally from food, or these days supplementation is common. You only need little tiny amounts of it. Right? Your body doesn't need that much boron or copper or selenium, right? Doesn't really need a lot of it to function properly, but there are very specific biochemical pathways that require those nutrients in order to function properly. And if you don't have those nutrients, those biochemical processes in your body will not function properly. And in many instances, they can cause problems. They can generate health problems. And I mentioned this in, I believe in the Tonics video that I did previously, but I'll mention it again here because it's really relevant. And I also think it's a genius analogy. And this one comes from Paul Bergner, one of my teachers in herbal medicine, but also in, I would say natural philosophy. And I like his nutritional approach too. But he says these different trace elements or nutrients are like the letters of the alphabet. And our biochemical pathways of our body are like a language that are built from those letters, those nutrients. And if you're missing, say the Z in the alphabet, like you could still, it's like not that big of a deal. You could still kind of speak English. But if you suddenly strip away the A, the E, the O, the S, all of a sudden it's like, a little bit hard to write or speak the English language if you're missing, 3 of the main vowels of the entire language. The same is true from a nutritional perspective in the body. Your biochemical processes can't communicate. They can't do their job effectively. And that can lead to a lot of complications. Sometimes physical health problems, not all the time, but sometimes they can remedy just by becoming replete in baseline nutrition. A really great modern example of this is magnesium deficiency. This is probably one of the most common nutrient deficiencies in the modern world. Again, this is because there's literally barely any magnesium in the food supply anymore. So a very large majority of humans are deficient in magnesium. And magnesium's doing all kinds of stuff in the body, right? It has to do with the relaxation of muscles and the neuromuscular junction. So magnesium deficient people tend to be a little more spasmodic. Women can have more intense menstrual cramps. The muscular system just tends to be more tense, tight. The nervous system tends to be more anxious, difficulty sleeping, a little more wound up, right? Magnesium kind of has a little bit of a calming effect on the nervous system. It's a key cofactor in the TCA cycle, or the Krebs cycle, which manufactures ATP, cellular energy. So if you're deficient in magnesium, oftentimes you'll be pretty fatigued. So there's lots of things that magnesium is contributing to. If you've got muscle cramps and muscle tightness and tension and spasm, it doesn't matter how many antispasmodic herbs you take, black cohosh and wild yam and lobelia and cramp bark, doesn't really matter how many of those herbs you take. If you're deficient in magnesium, the only way to get those muscles to really relax, like to get to the root cause of the problem, you got to become replete in magnesium. So this is why I like to make the case for nutritive tonic herbs. I think this is a really important category of herbs. And many of these plants tend to uptake trace elements, minerals that many of our foods do not provide. It's providing them in organic form, meaning not sprayed with pesticides organic, but organic like it's coming from a plant in nature, as opposed to USP synthesized vitamins that are, laboratory synthetics, which I think, I used to be really pretty gung-ho about, I was really anti-vitamins, really anti-supplements. We should be able to get everything from our food because it's more natural that way, obviously. But I've kind of had to change my perspective on that, especially considering the state of food these days. So I do think supplementation can be very helpful for a lot of people. So before I get into our formula, this is a very prolonged intro, but we have a theme amongst these herbs, some themes. Many of the herbs in this category tend to be astringent, tonifying, slightly astringent tonifying. In that way, a lot of the times they're vulneraries or wound healing. Many can be bitter tonic. Many can lower cholesterol, triglycerides. And many tend to have a diuretic or aquaretic property, meaning that they increase urination, especially the very mineral-rich ones. Aquaretic is more diuretic, but not through forcing the kidneys, but it's just doing it more through mineral exchange. Okay, so what's the formula? Well, for those of you that have been into herbal medicine for a long time, this formula is probably nothing you've never seen before. Maybe I use an herb or two that some don't think of, but these are the ones that I like here. So this would be 1 part dandelion leaf, Taraxacum officinale, 1 part alfalfa leaf, or Medicago sativum, 1 part nettle leaf, Urtica dioica, a half part of horsetail leaf, Equisetum arvens, and a half part of Irish moss. And this is the formula that I like, the nutritive tonic formula. Now, all of these herbs are very similar in the sense that they're incredibly rich in nutrients. I will mention some of the nuances of these herbs. So kind of go through each herb and we'll go through what nutrients they tend to be very rich in. We'll talk about some of the other actions that those herbs have. So let's 5 herbs, and I usually go on for a long time, so I'll try to bust these 5 herbs out in a timely manner. Well, I sure hope you're enjoying learning about this mineral-rich nutritive tea formula and that you feel nourished by all of the free content that we offer here at Evolutionary Herbalism. But ultimately there comes a point in your plant path where you know that you need to go deeper, that you need a more comprehensive approach, that you need to go to another level in your understanding of people and your understanding of plants so you can get out there and make a positive difference in your family, in your community, in your clinic, through the healing power of herbal medicine. And that really is what the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner Program is all about. And we are currently at the tail end of our 2025 enrollment period for the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner Program. So I would encourage you to click the link in the description, check out all the program details. This is our most in-depth, clinically oriented training program that goes through all the organ systems of the body and trains you on how to effectively treat the most common dynamics and issues and complaints and symptoms that you will most likely face in a clinical practice. You get all the tools for how to address them, not from an allopathic perspective, but from a deep, traditional, vitalist, holistic perspective where you're not just treating the symptom or the disease, but the person with it. So be sure to check out all the details on the Vitalist Herbal Practitioner Program. Enrollment closes tomorrow at midnight Pacific time. So check it out while you can, and I hope to see you in there. And with that, let's get back to learning more about our nutritive tea formula. So let's start talking about Irish moss. This is probably the one that most people maybe least expected to be in the formula. I like the Irish moss here for a number of reasons. Primarily here because it's moistening and because it's demulcent. What we have with a lot of these other herbs, especially with nettle and horsetail, is that they are a bit astringent and tonic, tonic astringent in that way, and then therefore a bit drying. Dandelion leaf is quite diuretic, I would say. So is nettle, so is horsetail. But dandelion's, horsetail and nettle are a little more aquaretic. Well, horsetail's diuretic. Yeah, they're all diuretic. You're eliminating peat, drying. Dandelion's bitter also, which makes it drying. Basically, all those herbs are very dry. So if you're going to be using a tea like this in the long term, that's something to be aware of. So I like the Irish moss here because A, it's super nutrient rich. B, it'll balance some of the dryness of those other herbs. Now, Irish moss is rich in a broad spectrum of nutrients. Specifically, actually has a decent amount of protein, at least, from the perspective of herbs. Very rich in minerals. As a seaweed, right? As a sea vegetable. It's got a bit of a more of a unique mineral profile than terrestrial plants. So it is rich in sulfur, iodine, which is a common mineral trace element that we'll find in sea vegetables, potassium, calcium, magnesium, the big ones there, iron, manganese, and sodium. Obviously the sodium gives it that little bit of a salty taste, but the sulfur and the iodine are pretty unique there. Now this herb is, we would classify it as a moistening agent, right? As a demulcent, as something that from an Ayurvedic perspective increases the kapha dosha. Chinese medicine, we would say it's tonifies yin, right? It increases that fluid generation aspect of the body that typically is influencing the mucosal membranes. So we see this definitely with the digestive system with Irish moss. It moistens the bowel as a bulk laxative. So it's very nice for people with dry constipation. It's also very nice for people with dryness in the respiratory tract. This is a great herb to consider for people that maybe have a really dry cough, or I like it for post-respiratory tract infections to kind of help recover and just get the mucosa back on track in the respiratory tract. We would think of this herb therapeutically for hot, dry, irritated mucous membranes, especially in the lungs, especially in the GI, maybe in the urinary tract a little bit, but I think it's more lung and GI than it is those. But one of the things that's important to consider is post-illness, right? Especially febrile illness. First of all, people are wiped out. Oftentimes you've been fasting. Hopefully you should always fast during a fever. But typically you emerge out of them pretty weak, deficient, and dry, right? Sometimes you've been coughing a lot, you've been feverish, you've been sweating a lot. Usually there's a need for increasing the fluid element of the body in the mucosa, in the tissues as a whole, in the constitution. and to convalesce, to recover from those febrile illness. So I really like it in that way. It's interesting. It's also hypocholesterolemic, so that's a good thing. It'll lower cholesterol. That's mainly because it's fibrous. So fiber tends to bind bile, which causes the bile to be excreted in the stool, whereas more often than not, most bile is reabsorbed and reused. But if you're binding it and causing it to be excreted with the stool, your body has to make more bile. Well, it makes that bile from cholesterol. And so the way it does that, it's going to pull cholesterol from the vasculature, from the system, bring it to the liver to create more bile. So that's good. That's a good thing. This is why it's not commonly recommended, eat oats for a healthy heart, right? Oatmeal. And that's because the fiber in the oats binds to bile. It can mildly increase thyroid function because of iodine. So that's always something worth noting with, and that's most of the sea vegetable, bladderwrack, kelp. Yeah, a lot of those sea vegetables tend to be that way. Another cool thing about Irish moss is that it can chelate heavy metals because it has sodium alginate as well as the polysaccharides. So this is not something I know a ton about in terms like therapeutically speaking, binding heavy metals, but this is one herb that actually does do that. So that's just a little bit of Irish moss. Very nice, nourishing remedy. I just like it because here it contains certain nutrients that you won't find in the other herbs in the formula, but it also, because it's moistening, I specifically like it here because it's going to bring a moistening property to what is otherwise a dry formula. Next herb is alfalfa. Now, alfalfa is interesting. I've grown to have a little bit of a different relationship with alfalfa because, we raise animals out here on our homestead. And so we use alfalfa. I got to buy, bales of alfalfa for the animals at certain points, usually when they're pregnant. So we usually feed. It's just interesting. Usually they eat hay or they're out grazing. In the winter, we'll hay them. But with the sheep and with the cow, when they're pregnant specifically, we supplement their diet with alfalfa. And that's just simply because it's incredibly nutritious, right? And you can see it in the animals. It's really incredible. You go from just haying pregnant ewes, for example, and then you start supplementing them with alfalfa, and all of a sudden you really notice it in their body composition and their energy levels and then just their preference too. You put the hay in front of them and you put the alfalfa in front of them. They all go for the alfalfa. They're like, I want that. So it's interesting for me, only really knowing alfalfa from my herbal perspective and thinking of it that way. And then just feeding it to animals more, and it's like, oh, it's just interesting. I can really see the nutrient dynamic with this herb based on how it is with the animals. So, anyways, alfalfa rich in the following nutrients: iron, magnesium, calcium, potassium. You'll see those three a lot. Vitamins A, B, C, D, E, K, folate, biotin. It's a very rich vitamin profile. Now, the vitamin D piece I think is interesting, and that's, that might be, that part's interesting. I feel like I'd like to learn a little more about that one. So I'm like, D, really? Now, how is alfalfa typically used? Well, we use it for general malnutrition. I tend to think of it if I see someone that's malnourished, they're very skinny, thin, weak, emaciated, they're tired. As I yawn, maybe they have blood deficiency, right? Maybe they, if it's a woman, if they bleed really heavily around menses, maybe they're a vegan or a vegetarian, and they're anemic. These are some indications I think of. Alfalfa is incredibly antioxidant, slightly astringent, a bit vulnerary, so you could use it a little topically. But it's very antioxidant, so protecting the body from inflammatory damage, oxidative damage. But yeah, I really think of it for people that are constitutionally weak. We can also use it for people that are maybe they have weakness in the bones, like osteoporosis actually is a very good use of it, or people recovering from broken bones, musculoskeletal injury, maybe like a torn meniscus or connective tissue injuries, weak connective tissues, hypermobility type things, deficient blood, like I said. So these are all some of the things I tend to think of for alfalfa, just basically expressions of malnutrition in a lot of ways, physical weakness. Now, one interesting fact about alfalfa that's always kind of confused me a little bit. Some of the old doctors would note alfalfa for neurasthenia. And for those of you not familiar with that term, neurasthenia would be essentially, I guess, what colloquially these days we would call burnout, but not like adrenal burnout. It's more of a nervous system exhaustion. It's just someone that's, they're stressed a lot. They don't sleep well. They push themselves too hard. And their nervous system is exhausted. And it's always confusing. Usually herbs that are indicated for neurasthenia are nervines. You see herbs like St. John's wort and milky oats and skullcap and things like that. Alfalfa is not really a nervine. We don't really think of it as this nice calming or even trophorestorative kind of thing for the nervous system. It doesn't really have relaxant properties. It's not really a nerve remedy in the way that it's used in a lot of ways and the way it's classified. But apparently, there's some animal research out there that seems to confirm this, that it has some nourishing and protective effects on the nervous system. So that would be almost like a neuroprotective effect. So, there's people that consider using this herb for some of those degenerative neurological conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, neuroinflammation, things like that. So it's interesting. And I think it's just, again, it's because it's potentially providing nutrients that aid in the building, restoration, nourishment of the nervous system, perhaps building blocks for neurotransmitters. I think those are all possibilities. Now, interestingly enough, it also acts on the other end of that, which would be we would say oftentimes like the overfed malnourished, where people have elevated cholesterol, elevated triglycerides, kind of that very common metabolic syndrome pattern. There are some indications that this herb can help lower some of those signs and symptoms of metabolic syndrome. So alfalfa is a really, really nutritive herb. Very broad spectrum, classic here. But just wanted to share a couple of those other nuances about that herb that perhaps you're not familiar with. Okay, next herb is probably the most popular nutritive tonic herb, and that would be nettle leaf. Urtica dioica. I think every herbalist, if it grows around them, should be out in the springtime picking nettle leaves, putting it in their soups, frying it up with their eggs, whatever. This is a great herb / food that is just a great herb, man. I mean, we got a lot of nettles growing around here. A lot of nettles on our property, specifically where we live. So we use a lot of nettles. We put it in a lot of food. We drink it in a lot of tea. We use it a lot. And it's just incredibly nutritive, right? Very rich in vitamin C, vitamin K, calcium, carotenoids. It's very antioxidant, potassium. It even contains some serotonin. It's got actually some histamine. So even neurotransmitter precursor material, neurotransmitters themselves. So there's some people that actually will use nettles like alfalfa in nerve tonic formulas to provide baseline nutrition to the nervous system. It's also very rich in silicic acid or silica. This is a fantastic herb. I mean, this is a key herb for, again, just nutritional weakness. Obviously, that's the intent of this formula. So, but with nettles, we see it more with, say, people that have capillary weakness. I think of it for people maybe that got if you ever see someone with like really red cheeks and you can see all the capillaries, that's a sign of capillary fragility. It's usually a sign of oxidation and vascular inflammation, but the vascular integrity, I don't know what's going on. I guess I'm tired today. Sorry for all the yawns. Jeez Louise. So weakness in the capillaries, oxidation, bruises easily, cuts easily, paper thin skin, like people that, they like bump the thing, they get the bruise, or they like touch a thing and they get the scratch, it's like, whereas another person like, normally wouldn't scratch someone with normal skin. So their skin's like thin. The nails are weak and brittle. The hair is weak and brittle. Like all the structural tissues are weak, brittle, thin, papery. Nettle leaf comes in. It just strengthens all of that, builds all that up. Good, again, too, for blood deficiency. It is rich in iron as well. So it builds iron, builds blood, nourishes the blood, strengthens the blood. Also, as an anti-discratic alternative, cleanses the blood. So this is where nettles is interesting. And I guess we kind of see that dichotomy with the alfalfa too, where it can help with high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and metabolic stuff while also providing nourishment. Nettles is kind of similar in that it's, on the one hand, very nourishing and building and kind of anabolic in a sense, but it also acts on the other side of that spectrum as in that it's an alternative. It's diuretic, it's anti-discratic, meaning it cleanses the blood. Dyscrasias or blood dyscrasias, where it was an old term used to denote like bad blood or dirty blood, a need for alternatives and cleansing, detoxifying type remedies. But nettle's very focused on the blood. It's mildly astringent, styptic, very good for a little bit of maybe bleeding in the urinary tract. It can even be, you probably wouldn't want to use it topically so much, at least not fresh like you would a plantain, but more internally, right? For some bleeding, mildly astringent, can be useful for diarrhea there too. Inflammation modulating. So nettles is I would say, like when compared to something like alfalfa, to me is definitely more medicinal. It has much more medicinal virtue, but it's relatively mild. It's very effective. Not to say it's not effective, but it's still something that if you're just going for the nutritive effects, it's totally fine to use, even if you don't need it for any of its other medicinal indications. Just going, 6 to 8 weeks of daily nettle infusions in the early springtime is, I think, a really great practice, especially when you're emerging out of winter. For us, we live a little bit more of strive to live a little bit more of a traditional lifestyle. So for us, the winter is a meat heavy season for us, right? We're eating a lot of meat. We're eating a lot of sundries, a lot of canned food. Not a lot of fresh food in the winter over here in Northwest Washington. So once those nettles come up, it's like, yes. But there's something about, that winter stagnation, that winter heaviness that I find nettle leaf is very nice of cleansing and clearing that out. Yeah, very, very good. Very nice herb. Very nutritious. Good plant. And it's the fresh leaf is nicely incorporated into cooked, like a cooked green. So you can do the nettle tops, cook it in, I like it in the morning with just like some spring onions, some nettle tops, some shiitake mushrooms, fry that up with some butter and crack a couple eggs and scramble a couple eggs up in there with a little like nettle onion mushroom omelet. It's pretty good. Nice breakfast. Great in soups and stews. Great in any mixed greens things. You just got to cook it, right? Now, a green that doesn't necessarily have to be cooked is dandelion leaf, right? So Taraxacum officinale. Good herb, another good spring herb, spring tonic, spring cleansing, nutritive herb. Very rich in nutritives, carotenoids, B vitamins, C, D, K, potassium, calcium. The root tends to have a little bit more calcium in it than the leaf, but nonetheless, dandelion leaf is very rich in potassium. In fact, it's considered a potassium-sparing diuretic. Now, this is one of the problems with conventional diuretics, thiazides, or what are called loop diuretics, is that, they work really well for making you urinate excessively and relieving edema and hypertension due to fluid retention, usually due to a heart or kidney deficiency, kidney problems, heart problems, etc. But the problem with that is that you're urinating so much, you're urinating out all of your potassium. So typically those thiazide diuretics need to be taken alongside with a potassium supplement. What's cool about dandelion leaf is that it's super rich in potassium. So, and it's a very effective diuretic. So I just think it's really cool. To me, it's like another symbol of the perfection of nature. So I really like dandelion leaf as a diuretic to clear fluids, drain fluids. Diuretics don't just work locally on the urinary tract to make you pee more. Like, those fluids got to come from somewhere. It's really, diuretics, the way I think of them, as purging fluids from tissue. That's why you take diuretics and you can see edema of the ankles go down. Right? It's because they're working, I think, systemically on the water element to relieve that excess water. So great for fluid retention, edema, get the kidneys going. Very, very nutritive. It's also bitter tonic, and so I think this is why I like it in this formula, because one aspect of enhancing the nutritional status of the body isn't just getting more nutrients in, eating more nutrients, consuming more nutrients. It's also making sure that you can digest and absorb them, right? So many people these days have compromised digestion, that they could eat the most nutrient dense food in the universe, but if their digestive systems are wrecked, they're not going to get any of it in. So having a bitter tonic in this formula, I think, is nice because it's going to aid in the absorption of the nutrients we're getting from those other herbs. Now, you can eat the young leaves in salads. It's bitter. The younger the leaf, the less bitter it is. The older the leaf, the more like white latex is in there, the more bitter it is. So for a lot of people, the young leaves can be combined in salads in reasonable quantities and consumed. For many, it's too bitter all by itself. I also think there's a way of dressing it up properly to make it to balance that bitterness, right? With some form of citrus or vinegar, some kind of sweetness in the dressing, like some honey, and then something kind of aromatic can be helpful too. To just ways of rounding out that bitterness. Oils and fats also are really good there too. So good nutritive tonic, strengthening, again, blood, bones, connective tissue, etc. All those structural tissues of the body are greatly enhanced through the use of dandelion leaf. Our last herb is horsetail, Equisetum arvens, another great spring tonic. You actually got to be a little bit careful with horsetail not to harvest it too late. So the way I was taught when I was at Bastyr is they say, the horsetail grows up and it's kind of this very phallus shaped, almost asparagus looking thing. And then those little frond like leaves unfurled down from the top. Now it said you don't want to harvest horsetail once those go past 45 degrees because they can concentrate minerals so much it can cause problems, right? It can agitate the kidneys. So you want to get young horsetail. Very rich in manganese, potassium, minerals, silicic acid. Silicic acid is the big one. It's interesting how many of these remedies are diuretic. So you got dandelion leaf, diuretic, nettle leaf, diuretic, horsetail, diuretic. So again, this herb is great for clearing dampness, flushing the urinary tract infection. All these herbs can be used to flush the urinary tract. I like horsetail here because it's a little bit astringent, so it can be used for hematuria in cases of, say, a kidney stone or cystitis. That would be, hematuria would be a slight amount of bit of bleeding in the blood in the urine. Nettles be that way too. It's a bit astringent as well. Interestingly enough, this herb is also used for hemoptysis or coughing up blood, which is, when I learned that, I was like, that's really interesting. So we don't think of horsetail so much as a respiratory remedy, but it controls bleeding. And I think that's because of its astringency, a tonic astringent. So here we have another nutritive tonic that is also astringent tonic. Very high in silicic acid or silica. Now, this nutrient is a cofactor for calcium metabolism. So if you are deficient in silica, your body can't use the calcium that it has to build bone, teeth, structural tissue, etc., hair, skin, nails. All those things require silica. That's why you can even see there's like the BioSil supplement, which is a silica supplement that is really promoted for hair, skin, and nails stuff. And that's how it's doing that. So, but it's not just the silica, right? There's other minerals, there's other cofactors, there's other flavonoids present in horsetail that really make it able to do these things. So, very good. Now, that's the thing too. I put horsetail slightly smaller amount in the formula just because it's a little stronger. It pretty rich in minerals, and sometimes if you do too much for too long, it can be a little bit irritating. So I like to maybe do a little bit less horsetail than the other herbs. I just do a half part there. I'll also do half part Irish moss there, just so it doesn't get overly demulcent and slimy. So I like to bump the Irish moss down a little bit there too. Now, which brings us to, how do you prepare this mineral-rich tea? Well, the best way to prepare nutritive tonic is either powder all the herbs, stick it in capsules, and take the capsules, or to prepare a tea. And I think a tea is preferable because to eat the herbs as powders requires your body has to digest that. If people have weak digestion, which a lot of people do, you can help them out by having them make it as a tea, help their digestion out, which making a tea out of the herbs is, in a way, it's like pre-digesting it. It's doing the extraction for the body, so the body doesn't have to do the extraction, essentially. So I think infusions, long infusions is the best way to prepare these types of herbs. Note the key word, long infusions. This is not a, dip a little tea bag in some boiling water for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and drink your cup of tea. That's not going to cut it. You really need long form infusions of these herbs to get an effective extraction. So what does that mean? That means I like to take these herbs and gently simmer it in water for 10 or 15 minutes, turn off the heat, cover it, infuse it for 45 minutes, an hour, somewhere in there. Sometimes you can take that and dump it into a thermos to keep it really hot and infuse it that way so it doesn't get too cold. I think that's actually the best way to do it. Another way to do it is to do it in just a coffee pot, in a coffee maker, right? So you can just put the herbs in the coffee pot, the water, and then that coffee pot just keeps it at that perfect hot temperature. It's perfect for making an infusion because it's not boiling the water. It's not even simmering the water. It's just a hot enough temperature to keep it nice and warm, which is very optimal for those types of long infusions. You're not going to get a good infusion if you just boil water, dump the herbs in a pot, and take the pot off the stove and let it sit. Because in 20 minutes, that water is going to be cold, and not cold, but room temp. And you're not going to get as good an infusion as you would if that water stayed nice and hot the whole time. So that's my recommendation. I would do, at least 1 to 2 teaspoons or a tablespoon, which is 3 teaspoons of tea per 8 to 12 ounces of water. I think this is one of those things where the more the better. I think a tablespoon is a sufficient amount of herb per 12 ounce cup of tea. A lot of recommendations are always 8 ounces. 8 ounces is not enough in my opinion. I like to drink at least a 12 ounce cup of tea. One other trick that you can do to optimize the mineral extraction of these herbs is put a little splash of apple cider vinegar in the water. Apple cider vinegar or vinegar acetic acid extracts minerals very, very well. So that is one thing I would also recommend. Sometimes you can have maybe a little bit of a vinegary taste, but sometimes people acclimate to it, and it does pull the minerals out significantly better. So long infusion, little splash of apple cider vinegar in there. You could put a little bit of honey in there if you want. If you want to, improve the flavor a little bit, perhaps this is a little bit too much of a mineral salt, maybe a little too bitter from the dandelion leaf tasting kind of formula. You could put, maybe a little bit of peppermint in there, or a little bit of fennel in there, or a little bit of tulsi in there, some sort of aromatic herb, carminative herb, cinnamon, right? Something yummy and tasty that you like, that you could enjoy. Obviously you'd be drinking, ginger's really great. Actually, I really love doing ginger in a formula like this. A lot of people like the ginger in there, actually. You're going to be drinking it every day for a while. So make it enjoyable, right? Make it taste good. Little ginger, little fennel, little peppermint, little tulsi, whatever flavor you kind of enjoy. Put a little honey in it and drink that. Now, I want to mention, we got nettle leaf, diuretic, horsetail, diuretic, dandelion leaf, diuretic. This formula will make you pee more, so don't drink it if you're going to be sitting in traffic for a really long time. I'd say that jokingly, but maybe consider it. And then also, this is usually not the kind of tea you want to drink right before bedtime. It is going to make you have to pee in the night, so I would not take it too close to bedtime. And I just want to close by a call to the Nutritive tea. This is a great way to incorporate herbal medicine into your daily routine. This is a great way to supplement. Like, think of this tea as a supplement. This is a multi-mineral, multi-trace element, nutritive supplement that could be considered right alongside your multivitamin. I think of this, and obviously not just to go alongside your multivitamin, but really to go alongside a healthy diet. That's no multivitamin or nutritive tea is going to replace a healthy diet. So I really encourage you all to try this formula or a formula similar to it. Sometimes you'll be surprised. After 6 to 8 weeks of drinking a tea like this, and you start to look at, some of those little minor irritating symptoms aren't there anymore. And sometimes you feel like, oh boy, I'm waking up a little easier in the morning, or I'm falling asleep a little better at night, or I've got a little better pep in my step, or I'm not getting as tired at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon like I normally do. Right? Those kinds of things sometimes happen for folks that are notably depleted in some of these all-important nutrients. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and for your attention. to join me here for this discussion of the mineral-rich tea, the Nutritive Tonic tea. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you learned a little bit about some of these plants. I hope that serves you well. And I just want to mention that if you're watching or listening anywhere other than our website, head over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, where all the stuff is happening over there. Be sure to join our email list where you'll get announcements for all of our fresh, brand new content on the plant path. You'll get exclusive access to some of our free workshops, webinars, enrollment periods where you get extra bonus modules and courses and discounts on our Evolutionary Herbalism program. So be sure to head on over to the website, check that out. If you're watching, listening on podcast, YouTube, anywhere out there on the internets, hey, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It really does help support the channel more than you might understand, and shows the channel to more people. The algorithms and all those types of things that I don't understand, but I do know that a like and a subscribe does help. So thank you very much for that. And until the next episode of The Plant Path, take care and be well.